and welcome to a new season, a brand new season of College Football Now. I'm Brant Parsons with Matt Michelle. We'll be doing this every Wednesday afternoon at 3:30. Not this week because there's only one game, but it'll be picks followed by Twitter questions and Facebook Live questions. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, we'll remind you a couple times throughout the show. You can ask a question at any time, and if I feel like it's a question we want to answer, then we will.
I like that. We get to decide if your question is worthy enough to be answered.
I'm just going to be honest with you. But every Wednesday at 3:30, we'll come in here and we'll pick our games. We'll talk about the hot topics going on that week. The season does begin officially Friday night local time, Saturday afternoon in Australia. So technically, the season is about to begin. But for the most part, it starts a week and a day from today. But a couple of the big topics we're going to get into. Then we're going to make our picks for state teams. But start off, you had a column this week where you talk about some of the main storylines heading into the season. And I got to go with the first one. It's one that I try to stay away from, especially on Twitter, of all places. Big 12 conference expansion. It's something that people are going to be watching, wondering. It's turned in kind of a debacle with the Big 12 listing 20 teams, 20 schools that have a chance. But where is it as we head into the season and what we're looking at with the Big 12 conference expansion?
Well, I think, when they first started doing this, I think Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowsby talked about, they didn't want this to kind of overlap into the season because they were afraid of taking it away from the stuff that was going on the gridiron. And I think it looks like now it is going to overhang over the season. I think you're looking at the fact that you've got all these teams now that are being listed. What is it, 20, 21 teams? I think it changes every day. So many schools are interested, obviously, in throwing their name in the hat to possibly be a part of the Big 12. So this is something that's going to, I think we're going to see maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks into the season. Hopefully not, but maybe could be. I think this was the Iowa State president who even said it could be any time between now and Christmas. So there you go. And as I tweeted out earlier, I think one of the ways they could solve those situations, like they did in the old Peanuts cartoon, everyone could just stand around the sad Christmas tree at the Big 12 and go like this. And I think eventually, we'll see what happens. But let's be honest. I think until they make a decision, this is something that's going to be there. Ask about it. Every player is going to be asked. Would just kind of go away or make a decision because we want to talk about college football.
I'm going to bring in another Peanuts reference. We're going to go with the Great Pumpkin, and a lot of schools are going to be opening up their bags on Halloween. I just got a rock.
Yes, I would say. Unfortunately,
if we can really tie this all sleepy together,
you're getting about 20 schools that are basically
a bunch of schools just getting a rock.
Exactly, and I think that's something that we're going to see, and I think unfortunately, and there's also, and people haven't really mentioned this. There's a possibility that the Big 12 may not expand at all. They may just decide this isn't the right time to do that. So all this would have been for nothing. It would have been a really bad joke.
Let's move on to the actual football coming up. And the University of Michigan with the splash signing into last year. Jim Harbaugh comes in, turns Michigan program around quickly. High expectations now, though. Is it Jim Harbaugh time? Are we going to see the next step taken by the Wolverines?
I think we will. Obviously he's done a tremendous job getting the Michigan brand out there. It's one of the things I think that we always knew Michigan was a good program, but I think it just kind of sagged a little bit over the last couple of years. And I think Jim Harbaugh was able to really revive that group. We've seen the emphasis now on Michigan football. You're talking about Jim Harbaugh. You're talking about Michigan football. We've seen it all summer long. We saw it in the camps, the satellite camps all over the country. What was it, like 32 camps in 30 some days. You saw it down in Tampa, in Bradenton, when he brought the team down there for a week of spring practice. So everyone's talking about Jim Harbaugh. And that's great and all. They won 10 games last year, but let's be honest. This team now, they have to start winning. It's great to be out there and to show that you've got the brand out there, but you're going to have to start getting those wins, especially key wins. You won 10 games, but now you got to win the Big Ten. Now you got to get yourself, into that college football playoff, because that's really when you cement yourself as an outstanding coach and you cement yourself that the program is actually back on the national landscape.
Talking about getting back on the national landscape, Pac-12 last year shut out of the playoff spot as teams shared losses and wins throughout the year. Is this a year that the Pac-12 bounces back?
I don't think so. I've looked at the Pac-12, and you see what's going on there, and you look at what Stanford's gone through. They lost a top quarterback in Kevin Hogan. Yes, they have Christian McCaffrey, who was the Heisman finalist, star running back, but I don't think Christian McCaffrey can carry the entire team, into the college football playoff. I think they have some question marks. You look at UCLA, you look at USC, Oregon's down. I think all these programs are down. And as I mentioned before, this is a conference that has really kind of beaten up on itself lately. I think that's what happened last year. That's why Stanford had 2 losses. You look at what some of the other teams have done. As soon as they get, maybe on the upward swing, they end up starting, once they get into conference play, they end up beating up on each other. And I think that's what's going to happen again with Stanford.
We're going to make our playoff picks in a bit, so we'll see if I agree with you on that, because I may not. But the final topic heading into the year, Alabama, can they go wire to wire?
I don't think so. I think if Alabama, I know Alabama comes in as the preseason number 1. We haven't had a number 1 team who started the preseason number 1 go on and finish at number 1 since USC did it in 2004. And there's a reason for that, because I think there's a lot of parity in college football. I think we saw that so much so in the last couple of years. And I think what's going to happen again with Alabama is I think there's going to be a game down the road that's going to trip them up. I don't think it's going to be USC to open things up, but I think maybe down the road it could be Ole Miss, it could be somewhere else. I think they'll get tripped up. But I think with even one loss, I think an SEC team gets into the college football playoffs. So I wouldn't say they're done if they lose a game, but I just don't see them going wire to wire, number 1, as many people think they might.
Okay, normally on this show, what we're going to be doing after this is making predictions for games coming up that weekend. There's only one game. We will make a prediction on it. It's not a big thrilling game. But we're also going to be taking Facebook Live questions and Twitter questions. And we have a couple Facebook Live questions that we'll get to, but one that we got to jump on. This is important. It's a very important question. And Scott Wynn wants to know, where does one buy a purple bow tie?
Where does one buy a purple bow tie? Well, you can buy them online. I mean, there's sites all over the country. I've got several places that I like to buy my ties from. I'm not going to give out any names, maybe because I don't necessarily get any reimbursement. Now, if someone wants to start sending me free bow ties, bow tie sponsorships for the show, I would gladly take that opportunity, obviously. But yes, I've got 3 or 4 purple bow ties.
There you go.
Hey Matt, I've got a follow up to that question. It's over 90-degree heat. We're in the middle. We're in the hottest part of summer here. How are you dealing with this top button and the bow tie? I had to give it up. It was too much for me.
Actually, it doesn't bother me. I think the first couple months that I would start wearing them a couple of years ago, you would maybe get a little bit. Now, when I'm out at practices, sometimes during the day I may not necessarily wear the bow tie, or I may not wear a long sleeve shirt when it comes to that. But most of the time, I mean, it really hasn't bothered me so much so.
I mean, you're in a 3-piece now. You've got the vest on.
Yes, too. I know. I mean, and I'm fine. I mean, I guess it's just
it's air conditioning.
It's just air conditioning.
And when you go outdoor practice, you have a T-shirt that has the bow tie.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's it. I just have the clip-on bow tie with the T-shirt, right? Is that
we need a photo of Matt in casual attire with the bow tie.
Now, I will say this, and again, this is not to get off the subject, is when people meet me outside on my own on my time off, is they don't recognize me because I don't wear the bow tie. So that I believe.
I believe.
Back to the football field.
Well, that's another show.
I derailed it.
That's another show.
I derailed it. I jumped out at the question. I derailed it there. What I would like to do now is go through each school in the state, the 5 FBS teams, and do a quick prediction on what we think the season is going to be. I've even come up with a record for each one. Let's start right here in Orlando. UCF last year. We know what happened last year. 0-12. Coach quits midseason. Scott Frost takes over. UCF fast. UCF fierce. There's excitement about this program, but we know when a new coach comes in, it takes a little bit of time to maybe implement what you want to happen with the team. But heading into the year, I'll mention this for each team in our preseason countdown, which you did from 128 to 1. You had them at number 90, which some may think is high, some may think is low. Is right outside of being bowl eligible. But UCF coming into this year, tough schedule at points, not so tough other points. Your prediction for the Knights heading into year, and then I'll get into mine and see how we compare.
Well, I look at this team. I think 5 wins would be a great season for this team. And I mean, I know people might scream, "Oh yes, but we got Scott Frost and the new offense." I just think it takes time. I mean, I think it's one of those things where. The players are adjusting to Scott Frost and his staff right now. They're rebuilding their bodies. This is a whole new offensive system, a whole new defensive system that we've seen here. We know the tempo is going to be a big key factor for them. I think they can get 5 wins. I think they can go, if they go 2-2 in their non-conference schedule, I think that opens the door for maybe 3 wins in the conference, maybe 4. If they get to a bowl game, if they win 6, I think that's an outstanding year for them because I just feel like you're another year or two away maybe from being right where you're going to be consistently playing in bowl games and maybe even competing for the American Athletic Conference title. But I don't think it's this year. I think if you get to 5 wins, I think that's a great year. You capitalize on that. You get your recruiting going like they've been going right now. And I think eventually that kind of shot puts you into the next year 2 and year 3 where things are much better.
Yeah, I mean, you look at recruiting and you see the guys coming in now, a full year recruiting. This upcoming National Signing Day, I think you're really starting to see the change for UCF. But I looked at the schedule, and I have them going 4-8. But out of the Michigan, Maryland, or Houston game, UCF is going to put a scare into one of them. A real legit scare to where they're in it at the end. I don't know which
Maryland,
one it'll be. I mean,
if you want me, I would think Maryland would be the game.
But one of those 3 games,
because
they're
one,
going
it's
to put a
home,
scare into.
it's at home. I think Michigan's going to be tough because you're on the road, and Michigan's always going to be a tough. Ann Arbor's a tough place to win and to play at. I think Maryland's probably their best opportunity. I think because, again, you got a team that's got a new coach itself. It's got some question marks in some key positions. That's probably the game I would say you might get a chance at doing something great, maybe pulling off an upset. I think Houston, again, unless something happens there, I think they have too much weapons and too much power on that team.
And don't use any of our choices in Vegas for over-under betting. This is all for
No,
recreational
not
purposes only.
purposes only.
Florida State last year, 12-3 losses to Clemson, Georgia Tech, and of course the embarrassing loss to Houston in their bowl game. Heading into the year, you had them at number 6, which plays out on our bowl projections to be an Orange Bowl appearance versus Michigan. So we kind of have an idea where you see Florida State heading this year, but I'll let you expound on that.
Well, I mean, I have them just outside the college football playoff. I mean, I think this team, obviously offensively, they've turned so much talent. They have so much depth. But I think there's question marks at quarterback when we talk about situations with Sean McGuire. I always thought that DeAndre Francois was going to eventually get the start at quarterback for them. But I feel like, having to be thrown in now against Ole Miss, a team that's an up-and-coming SEC team that's beaten Alabama the last 2 years, this is going to be a big test for them as well. I think Dalvin Cook puts together another great year. I think really my concerns are on the defensive side of the football. I mean, I know Derwin James is a great player, but I think they have some players right now that they're going to have to kind of shift in and shift out and really work them in, and they're going to get tested early. I mean, Chad Kelly is an outstanding quarterback. I think Chad Kelly can put up a lot of big numbers against this Florida State defense. So, again, I think there's some games that's going to be a challenge. I think Clemson game is going to be a challenge. And I always think, too, that a Louisville game, on the road at Louisville is a game that maybe you have to get tripped up on. So there's 3 right there possibly. But listen, if they only lose 1 game and they somehow, if maybe it's a Clemson, there's an opportunity. Maybe there's 2 ACC teams get into the college football playoff. Who knows? But right now I've got them at 6.
I have them going 14-1 and being in the playoffs. I talked about Florida. I liked this team a lot last year. This year's version, the key is going to be at quarterback. He's going to be tested early, but you don't have to worry about the wrong guy starting. Circa Ohio State 2015. You don't have to worry about Sean McGuire there just because of his experience. But I like this Florida State team. They get Clemson. I think Florida State's going to be playing in the playoffs and one of the top 2 or 3 teams throughout the season as it goes on.
And I agree. I think there's a lot there, but I will also point this out too, that Francois, with their quarterback depth situation, with McGuire being hurt, if Francois goes down against Ole Miss, it's J.J. Cosentino who steps up. And then after that, it's, they really don't have a lot of options. So I think they got to make sure everyone stays healthy. If they stay healthy, I think they can go put together a great
Say
year.
that about a lot
Well,
of
any team. That's true about any team.
Beyond Alabama, Ohio State,
but I'm just pointing out the fact that, again, McGuire needs to get healthy. They need some depth there because they need to make sure. We saw what happened against Houston. So,
Florida Gators last year, 10-4, SEC East champs, 3 bad losses to end the season, though. Put a sour note heading into this year. You have them number 21 in the preseason countdown, which translates in my bowl projections to an Outback Bowl appearance versus Wisconsin. What should Gator fans expect from their team this year?
Well, I think they're going to take a step forward. I do believe that, but I also feel like on the field they'll take a step forward. I feel like wins and losses wise, maybe a little bit back when it comes to the wins. I don't think this team's going to win 10 games. I think maybe if they get to 8 or 9 wins, that would be a big for them. I want to see what Luke Del Rio can do as a quarterback. I know he's been named the starter. Everyone has a lot of high hopes for him. They need consistent play out of that quarterback position. We saw what happened when Will Grier started last year. Really kind of got going. I think things looked really good with the offense, but then once he went out, they just struggled. They could never seem to find that consistency of putting up points and getting yards, and that really kind of hurt them in the long run with the defense because the defense was on the field so much. Listen, this defense is going to be just as good as it was the last couple of years. I think it could even be better depending on some of their spots. It's always going to come back to the offense with this team. Again, it will this year with Luke Del Rio at quarterback. They also need to find a consistent running attack. I think that's something Florida fans aren't used to seeing, having a guy maybe who could rush for 1,000 yards. And I also think they have to worry about their offensive line. They need some depth on that offensive line because, again, if they lose some talented guys, I think this team could be in trouble, especially with a schedule that features games against LSU, against Tennessee, games, that maybe down the road Florida State. Those are the games that really could kind of come up and catch you.
Well, if you watch any of our shows last year, I was bullish on the Gators last year.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Had the shirt there. But I'm bearish on them this year. I think the Gators will have a step back. I agree with you. I think wins and losses step back. But I think the program is in the process of remolding in Jim McElwain's vision of what it's going to be. And next year, as excited as I am, this Seminoles team, I think next year is the Gators team where you can get excited for it. But the one thing, you look at Florida's schedule, 6 or 7 W's almost automatic. Then you have a tough game with Tennessee, you have LSU, you have Arkansas, and you have the rivalry games with Georgia and Florida. I have them going 9-4, but if Del Rio turns into more than what we saw at his other stops, and he can keep the offense on the field, because that's what happened to Florida last year. Is the defense was one of the best defenses in the country, but as the season wore on, they wore down. And you keep putting so much on your defense, and it cost them at the end. But I have Florida 9-4, but we have a question coming up in Facebook Live with Tennessee. You can't count Tennessee to beat them, so it can change, but that's where I have them. Another coaching change within the state as we head down to Miami, 8-5 last year. Mark Richt has brought in enthusiasm both in fans, in boosters, in players. It was the right hire for all those reasons. Miami coming into this year, you have them at number 25, so they reached the top 25 of your countdown. Translates into a Pinstripe Bowl against Northwestern.
Woohoo, Pinstripe Bowl.
Say, New York in the holidays is a very fun place to be.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
If you were a beat writer for the Hurricanes that was into that sort of thing, you would probably really look forward to going to New York.
I'm not doubting.
It's like my yearly trick of her. I put them in the Pinstripe Bowl, so she thinks she's going there for holidays. But the Miami Hurricanes, lots of optimism moving forward. Oh, yeah. Can we see some of those changes this year?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I've got Miami in top 25, like you said, because I just think this team, as their head coach, I mean, Rick obviously has the experience from coaching all those years at Georgia. Did a pretty good job there, you could say. I mean, obviously didn't have the kind of finish that I back at Miami. He's going to go do all the play calling. I think that alone will help out with Brad Kaya on the offense. I think Kaya is a great quarterback. I just think he needs to take that one step more to kind of become an elite quarterback that we haven't seen. I think having a guy like Mark Richt, a former quarterback, a guy who has, who will be calling the plays, I think that will help him get to that level. I think Manny Diaz, the new defensive coordinator, is a great hire for them. I think the defense is going to be a lot more attacking, taking advantage of situations. And again, that all pays off on field position. I think that's something that's going to help them out as well. So I think Miami's there. The Coastal's wide open. I mean, listen, North Carolina, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Duke, Georgia. I mean, all those teams are right there. I think Miami's got a perfect opportunity to get there. And imagine, if you could then, possibly down the road, a Florida State-Miami rematch from a regular season in the ACC championship.
Well, on our award-winning podcast, that's the prediction I made.
Yes,
was a Miami-Florida State ACC title game. I have them penciled down for 10-3. It could easily be 11-2, losing to Florida State and Notre Dame. They get Notre Dame at home, or North Carolina at home a week after Florida State, which may be tough depending on what happens in that game to bounce back. But I could easily see Miami winning 10-11 games. So I'm with you on that. I think that you're going to see some of that talent realized in Coral Gables. Last team in the state to touch upon, USF, last year 8-5, rallied to win 7 of their 8 regular season games before a bowl loss. We have them number 45 heading into the year with a postseason bowl game in St. Pete against Boston College. Your thoughts on the Bulls?
Well, I think this is another team that's got a chance to have another great year. You look at what Willie Taggart's been able to do. It's taken him a little bit. Every first couple of years, he hasn't really lived up. This team hasn't lived up to what I think people thought we were going to be. But he's managed to get them where they're at now. And I think a lot of that is he's been able to recruit a lot of homegrown talent and keep those kids in the Tampa Bay area going to this school. And I think that's really helped them out. I think we saw they've made some changes in the last offseason. Offense looks a lot better. Quentin Flowers steps in at starting quarterback. I think he's proven that he can run that offense now. You look at what Marlon Mack, we know he can do. He's a talented running back. Offensive line is going to be a little bit rebuilt with some junior college transfers coming in. And then I think you look at also their defense. Their defense was so much the key to last season's success because they went to that 4-2-5 setup, which really helped them become more attacking, really helped them get turnovers, have mistakes, get better field position. All that paid off in that stretch, as you mentioned, where they won 7 or 8 games. So I see them possibly winning the East in the American. I see them playing for the American Conference Championship. I don't know if they can beat a Houston now, but I think they're going to put together a pretty good season. And then you look at their schedule at home. I mean, their schedule has a couple of games. Florida State, obviously, one of the key ones. But I think that they can easily get themselves maybe to a 9 or 10 win season.
Yeah, we were talking middle last year about whether Taggart would even still be coaching
I don't think
by
he
the
was
time
gonna,
they got
yeah,
here.
At the end of the year, it looked like for a while that he was going to be gone. And then all of a sudden now he has that great year, and you're hearing offers of him, being offered for the job at South Carolina and stuff like that. So, again, I think Taggart's done a great job with USF. If they pull together another 9, 10 win season, don't be shocked to hear Taggart's name come up once again for jobs that'll be out there.
I have them down for 10-3. It's a tough schedule, though. They do have Florida State, and their road games include Temple, Cincinnati, and Memphis. 3 not easy road games to have. Obviously, I think they'll pick up at least a win at 1 or 2 of those. But 10-3 for USF and battling in the American. Before we move on to our playoff picks, you are watching us live. We're available on Facebook Live. You can ask questions there. I guess I'll read this question verbatim, but it is Florida really Tennessee's daddy? And since we were talking about the Gators and talking about the Volunteers, it's a funny question because it's obviously written with a color of orange and blue slant, but Tennessee cannot seem to get over that hurdle of Florida. Even when Florida's been down, they haven't been able to knock off the Gators.
No, they haven't. And in the last 2 years is probably their best opportunities. Both, Florida coming back and winning last year in dramatic fashion, and then you look at the year before that, both those wins by 1 point apiece. Again, Florida seems to find a way to get the win when they need to get the win. This is the thing with Tennessee. When people ask me, well, who do you have winning the East? And I say Tennessee, but it's such a thin line between the Volunteers and Florida and Georgia because I just don't trust Tennessee 100%. I mean, you saw what happened last year. They were in games at halftime or third quarter, and then the fourth quarter they would collapse. Until they can prove to me that they can finish games and they can, and they can do it on a consistent basis, until they can beat Florida, then I don't think Tennessee, to me, is that elite program that you think it might be winning the East. I think they have to beat Florida. I'm not sure if they do that again this year. It's going to be tough. But you look at the talent, you look at what they return back, I think if any year is going to happen, it's going to be this year.
So there you go. That's the daddy question.
The daddy question.
If you have any other questions on Facebook Live?
Is this like Maury, where you like, and Florida is not your father? Woo! Live TV. There we go.
No, so and before we get into the season starting, playoff picks. Your playoff picks are known because they will be in our football preview section. It's time for a plug. It comes out in tomorrow's Orlando Sentinel. There's a special section on the Knights. And it's all in there, trust me. Seminoles, Gators, varsity. Pick it up in tomorrow's Orlando Sentinel. A lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears goes into this. And you'll be able to see who Matt has in his top 4. But we're going to save you at least on that, and I'm going to ask you right now, who is in your college football playoff?
Well, I've got Clemson, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Notre Dame, of all teams, in my top 4. I think that, Clemson, obviously, Deshaun Watson comes in as the probably overall favorite as a Heisman Trophy candidate going in. You look at what they return on offense. Again, they were so close last year. He single-handedly really brought them back in that game against Alabama, the national title game. I think they're hungry. They want to try to win that again. I think Oklahoma's in the same sort of boat. Baker Mayfield comes in. He's able to kind of spark that team on. They've lost some talent on the defensive side of the ball, but again, I think the Big 12 is open for them. I think they can win that as well. Alabama's Alabama. I mean, every year they seem to find a way, Nick Saban does, to restock the shelves and get that program back to where they're going to be. And I like Notre Dame's talent level. I mean, I know they've had some recent issues off the field, but you look at what Notre Dame's been able to do. Deshaun Kaiser, Malik Zaire, 2 talented quarterbacks. Brian Kelly says he's going to use both of them at some time. I like what Notre Dame's able to do with their schedule. I think they can possibly get themselves in there with some top quality wins.
I notice 2 conferences missing in yours, Big 10 and Pac-12. Not in your playoff.
Yes, and I think the Big Ten is just right on the outskirts looking in. Possibly could find their way in that 4th spot. So it's not. I think the Pac-12 has the hardest route to get into the Final Four.
And I, on our award-winning podcast, agreed with you on the Big Ten. I felt that Big Ten will have too many losses just from their hard schedules and such. They're not in my playoff. My playoff picks, I've already mentioned one of them, Florida State. The Seminoles, I believe, it's the ACC. Whoever wins between Florida State and Clemson, I think, takes that spot. But I am a believer in the Florida State Seminoles. The Oklahoma Sooners, I'm going to have to agree with you on this. Baker Mayfield comes back, has a chance to lead a revival under Bob Stoops with the Sooners that they showed last year, that they're just on the cusp. I think they get over that cusp this year. I have Alabama because Alabama. It's Nick Saban. It's the SEC. Whoever wins the SEC is going to get in the playoff. I think it's almost an unwritten bylaw to the playoff, and I think Alabama is going to have the talent. I'm not a big believer in LSU at quarterback. I'm not a big believer in anybody in the East being able to beat the SEC team out of the West in the SEC title game. And my fourth pick is Stanford. And it's a little offbeat, but I think whoever wins the Pac-12 is going to get into the playoff also. And I look at that Stanford team. I love Christian McCaffrey. He's the best football player that nobody has seen because he does not get as much. He gets some, but he does not get the. If he played at Alabama, you would see every highlight all day, every day. He is a dynamic player. He can do a lot. And I think Stanford has built a base there, and they're going to be able to pull off the Pac-12, come in with that record, and get into the playoff.
Yeah, I think, all those teams as you listed, I mean, there's good reasons why they could be in the college football playoff, and I think that's what makes college football so exciting for us. I mean, because you have all these teams right now, and we're less than a week away, and you've already got 6 or 8 teams right there that we listed off that possibly could be in there. So I think that's what's going to be good about it, and I think that's what we're excited to see.
All right. If you have any questions, feel free to post them at any point on Facebook Live. We're going to get to our Twitter questions just in a moment, but there is one game this week. It's taking place in Sydney, Australia. One game. You can watch it Friday night if you're here in the Eastern time zone. It's at 10 p.m. If you're in Sydney, Australia, hello, mate. It's going to be played at noon. On Saturday. Is that right, or is that even?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's.
Was that English or was it Australian?
Maybe not do that again.
Yeah. Everybody's always the smart ones are always behind the scenes. But Cal and Hawaii open up this season. Cal with a new quarterback taking over, Davis Webb, a graduate transfer from Texas Tech. He takes over. They have all their top 3 running backs returning at Cal, but all the receivers were gone last year. Top 6 receivers all gone. Cal has had a bit of resurgence themselves. They were 1-11 just 2 seasons ago in 2013, 8-5 last year. Hawaii has a new coach, the former quarterback who starred under June Jones, Nick Rolovich, who's going to try and bring back some of that June Jones magic to the Rainbows.
If you think about it, great education.
Yeah. The Hawaii exemption is allowing this game to be played.
Yes.
But now Hawaii, because Hawaii plays 13 games.
Yes, and that
because and if you play Hawaii, you get to play an extra game.
Yeah.
And so they're not allowed to play before Labor Day.
Yes.
Or Labor Day weekend, which is when the regular season starts. So let's put this all together.
But
and we get football on Friday night.
We get football on Friday. I like Cal in this game, because I think look at what Sonny Dykes has been able to do. I think Davis Webb was a great addition for that team. We saw what he kind of tried to do at Texas Tech. Had some success. Was hurt, I think, towards the end of his career there. Decided to transfer at one point. Was talking about going to Colorado. Then decided at Cal. They needed to find someone to replace Jared Goff. I mean, Goff was such an amazing player last year. So again, I think this offense puts up a lot of points. I think they're favored by almost 3 touchdowns. I like Cal in this game, but everyone should stay up and watch because it's college football on a Friday night.
I've got Cal, and I've got myself going to bed by midnight because the game is put away. Because it's just
over or under on how early you go to bed. Let's see.
What time I go to bed, because I have little kids that will wake me up bright and early. We have 3 Twitter questions. Before we get to the Twitter questions, we had someone who sent you an email question, and I liked it so much I wanted to address it here. And it's a question I've asked you just personally throughout the offseason. You seem to have a lot of confidence in teams that have had destructive off-the-field issues. I've not said destructive, but like Baylor. And he said Notre Dame. I don't know what Notre Dame off-field issues were destructive, but you have. Let's talk about Baylor, and you do have faith in them this season to be able to overcome the distraction somewhat, and you still have them pretty high up in your countdown.
Yeah, I had him at 10 in my countdown. I had him there, and I went back and forth on this, and I kind of, but the idea is I think they're, like we've kind of mentioned before, razor thin line, where this team has a lot of talent. I think Seth Russell put up a lot of amazing numbers. I think the offense is going to put up a lot of points. Listen, their schedule is super easy when you really look at it to start out with. I think they'll put up a lot of points. they just keep self-destructing on themselves. You have all these issues that come up. Obviously, we know what happened in the offseason. We know what happened recently. Jim Grobe comes in. He's just trying to kind of man the ship for this next year. He's an interim coach. I think they're going to win some games. That being said, the first time they lose a game, I want to see how this team reacts, because right there is where everything could go fall apart and break apart. If they lose a game and those players start pointing the finger at each other, or they start saying, I'm done, this is it, I'm ready to go to the NFL, I'm going to transfer, whatever, then this team could easily spiral downwards really quickly. So I have faith that they have the talent to where they're at. I may not believe so much in what the message is there, but I think that if they can continue to do what they do, I think they're going to win some games. But that first loss, or the first time they suffer some sort of hardship, that's really when you're going to see what this Baylor team is made of.
All right, I'm going to ask Chuckleheads behind the mic back there. Are we all set to go on the Twitter questions? All right.
Yes.
You'll be appearing at Chuckleheads twice this week. Make sure you tip your bar side. First Twitter question. I'm guessing it comes from DW White. I'm not sure if they are or not, but why don't UCF and USF market together for the Big 12?
Well, I don't understand why the two schools should, to be honest with you. I think you look at what happened, what USF did to UCF years ago when they made the big move up to the Big East. There was never any sort of, hey, you have to take UCF with us, to do that. They kind of left UCF behind. UCF had to make its own way to find itself in the American down the road. So if I'm the American, or if I'm UCF, why would I want to take them up? I understand maybe packaging the deal up presents a more attractive option with the television the television audience. Maybe you look at what the football programs are both kind of on the rise, so to speak, even though UCF's coming off that winless season. I think if you're looking at the Big 12 situation right now, there isn't even a given that they're going to take 4 teams. They may only take 2. If that's the case, it's every man for himself. And I think that's been kind of the thought process through all this. So it's not like they're opening the door and letting everyone in. I think they have to be very cautious. So to me, I think really that's why they haven't packaged themselves together. I think there are some people maybe in the state who would love to see the two schools do that, but I think maybe
what Big 12 is looking for, and it was, as you said, every man for themselves. And I think you kind of got the sense that if the Big 12 was going to expand, they're only going to take one from Florida because they're spreading out in different directions.
Yeah.
And they're not looking for a partner. You're not looking for a travel partner in this situation.
Yeah, and I also think too that the Big 12 is, as much as television audiences are important, so to speak, I don't think that's going to be as big of an issue in the coming years, because I think we're seeing so much going on with cord cutting and the idea of online streaming and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily believe that they had to bring in these two schools and then whoever else. I think if they expand, it's only going to be 2 people, and I think that's where they just need to get a foothold in the state of Florida. That only requires 1 school.
I told you we weren't going to talk about Big 12 expansion, and then the first Twitter question, I hit you with it. 33 Trigger asks, who takes the Big 10 this year? And then asks us for a top 3 order in the Big 10, which is, we can pick our top 3 teams, I guess, but they'll have 2 teams in a playoff. But anyway, so your Big 10, who wins it?
Well, I like Ohio State. I know people talk about, Urban Meyer lost all this talent and this team's going to be not as good as it's been the last couple of years. I don't see that happening. I think you and I you probably agree with me. He recruits so well. He's stocked that team up. He's like Alabama does in the SEC. You just keep loading up these players. And I think what's going to happen is you got a guy like J.T. Barrett who comes back and brings a lot of experience and that leadership, which is going to be crucial for that offense, because they need someone to be able to corral the guys sometimes when they're in the huddle. And I think you look at defensively. They got key guys on defense back as well. And it's Urban Meyer. This team is going to face some challenges. This is why I didn't have the Big Ten necessarily a given in the college football playoff, because you look at the schedule. They're going to have to face They're going to have to face an Oklahoma team. I think Oklahoma on the road is going to be very tough for them. I look at their non-conference schedule, and yes, they face Bowling Green and they face Tulsa, but both those programs put up a lot of points. They put up a lot of yards. That's their offensive system. That's going to test this team early on. I think that's going to help them later on when they get into the Big Ten schedule. And then you look around in the East, you got Michigan and Michigan State. I think Michigan's probably second after Ohio State. I think we talked about Jim Harbaugh's done a great job. I think they got to decide who their quarterback is, but they've got so many options there as well. And then I look at Michigan State. Mark D'Antonio is one of the most underrated coaches in college football. He's done an amazing job. They've got a new quarterback as well. They've got some key pieces missing. I really think it's those 3 teams when I look at the Big Ten.
I got to agree with you on those 3. And when we did the Big Ten podcast, I was really trying hard to not pick Ohio State to win it. But the questions that Michigan has at quarterback, and the benefit for Ohio State, they get Michigan at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see a stacked stock talent that's young. So I think Ohio State loses to Oklahoma. In fact, I think whoever wins the Big Ten has 2 losses. I think that's why I don't have them into the playoff. But I think Ohio State is going to be as good as they're going to be as the season goes on. They get Michigan at the end. We're ignoring the West. We're going to talk about the West on the other Twitter question, but I have to agree with you. I think it's a toss-up between Michigan and Michigan State as the second best team in the conference. It's all right there in the East.
Yeah.
They're all going to play each other. That's why they're going to have losses, and that's why the Big Ten will be shut out of the playoffs this year.
Well, and then we didn't even mention Penn State, which I think is going to be really vastly improved from last year as well. So there's so much talent in that East of the Big Ten. I just think that's why everyone's kind of going to, eventually going to kind of catch up with each other. So, but I do like Ohio State. I do like Urban Meyer. I mean, you look what he's been able to do. He's an excellent coach. He restocks the program. I think that's why they're there.
And our last Twitter question, it comes from QC Hawkeye in Florida. Maybe it's Chalkeye in Florida. Either way, we know where this is going. But how's the Big Ten West shaping up? Can Wisconsin beat Iowa on the road? And if so, how will that happen? This is a friend of mine that wasn't real thrilled that Iowa was below Wisconsin in the rankings, if we're going to give a little background there. But how does Wisconsin go in and beat Iowa in Iowa City?
Well, I think what they have to do is they have to have great quarterback play, and that's going to be a question mark for them because they come. I mean, we know Wisconsin's done an amazing job with their running attack. They've had a little bit of a down year last year, didn't have a 1,000-yard running back. I think if they get good, solid quarterback play, I think if they can get the defense to kind of handle C.J. Beathard, because that's always been the issue, is, Beathard has put together a pretty good year. If they can contain them, I think they got a chance to win. It's going to be a low-scoring affair no matter what.
And that's it. We did it.
We did it?
We made it through the first show, the first live show of the 2016 college football season. You want to do this again next week?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it again.
Every Wednesday at 3:30, we will be here doing College Football Now. We'll take questions from you on Twitter all week long, and also during Facebook Live as this is going on. We got to learn about your bow ties.
Yes, we did. I'll have a new segment called Bow Ties, or we'll do some bow tie
Look for a sponsor. Let's get a sponsor first.
On that. Yes, let's get a
sponsorship. Before we start making up segments, we need to get a little bit of money for it. For Matt Marshall, I'm Brant Parsons. The college football season is here. Make sure tomorrow pick up a copy of the Orlando Sentinel at your favorite local convenience store or grocery store. I was going to say newsstand, but those don't exist anymore, do you?
No, I don't think so.
I was about to date myself.
You're
Hey,
going to date yourself.
Go to Joe's News down in South Miami and pick up your...
No.
But the football section comes out tomorrow. It is jam-packed with stuff heading into the year of all the college teams, the NFL teams, and, of course, every high school team in our coverage area. We'll be with you next Wednesday again for College Football Now, and we will be making our picks for Week 1. Don't miss it. It's going to be a lot of good picks.
Yes,
I think we're very good at picks.
It's probably the best weekend in college football in probably maybe 30 years.
It's one of the top ones. 1998, I think, had more top 25 ranking meeting up. But it is a big weekend. We'll have lots of picks, all of your questions, all coming up next Wednesday at 3:30. Thanks for watching at OrlandoSentinel.com.